of South Africa to the Kukebo farm of Emerson Mnangagwa has left numerous Zimbabweans with a lot of questions as to what exactly was the visit, taking into consideration that PF characterized the visit as a private visit. Of course, the South African government characterized it as a working visit. The visit was done without protocols. The government of Cyril Ramaphosa did not announce his visit to Zimbabwe prior his visit on a holiday to be on a Sunday, and the details of why normally when meets in a normal democratic country, not in a banana republic, they would address the nation to give a picture of why exactly the president of a foreign country visited the host country. But in Zimbabwe, that was not explained. That is why you would see individuals like Trevor Ncube writing open letters to Cyril Ramaphosa regarding his visit. So it says, "Dear Cyril, hot nopping with Mnangagwa's cronies wounds, my country," an open letter to President Ramaphosa from Zimbabwean businessman Trevor Ncube. It says, "Dear President Ramaphosa, your private visit last week to President Emerson Mnangagwa's farm has unsettled millions of Zimbabweans, and it deserves a public reply. You arrived in our country at a moment of profound constitutional peril. Mnangagwa is leading a brazen effort to dismantle the 2013 constitution, a charter endorsed in a national referendum by more than 3 million Zimbabweans. Intimidation, state-sponsored violence, and a parliamentary process that has descended into theater. Constitutional Amendment number 3 carries a slate of changes whose cumulative effect, like the 2 amendments before it, is to strip power from the people and concentrate it in the hands of the executive. Into this moment you walked, and the company you kept tells its own story. Seated at Mnangagwa's table were Paul Tungwarara, Budawashe Takwire, and Wicknell Chivai, men whose business empires are tethered to Mnangagwa's political longevity, and whose interests are best served by mutilation of Zimbabwe's constitution that he is engineering. They are not patriots, they are passengers on a gravy train, and you were photographed boarding it with them. The speculation here, Mr. President, is that Takwire is being groomed as Mnangagwa's anointed successor. A man who, by every honest measure, is unelectable. That is precisely what one of the proposed amendments would permit. Whether or not you knew this, your visit has been seized upon as an endorsement of Mnangagwa's constitutional coup. Surely your protocol team flagged the names on the guest list. Surely you understood the symbolism of breaking bread with them. If you did not, that is troubling. If you did, it is worse. You were not by any visible measure on a mediation mission. We saw no parallel meetings with civic society, opposition leaders, the church, organized business, or legal fraternity. There was no breadth, no balance, no evident attempt to understand the country whose crisis you were ostensibly engaging. We have been here before. Former President Thabo Mbeki stood on Zimbabwean soil after one of the bloodiest electoral seasons in our history and pronounced that there was no crisis in Zimbabwe. That single sentence licensed a decade of impunity. South Africa's errors, its quiet diplomacy, its strategic blindness, its instinctive preference for ruling party fraternity over principled engagement have helped to entrench the repression and crushing poverty that today define our country. The bill is also being paid in your country. Oh, the very conditions that South Africa has helped to preserve were what drives Zimbabweans across the Limpopo in their hundreds. It goes on. If your government is serious about easing the pressure on its own citizens, about ending the accusation that Zimbabweans are taking South Africa, then it must abandon the fiction that giving up Mnangagwa serves regional stability. It does the opposite. If none of this interests you, if the 17 million people inside Zimbabwe and the more than 800,000 in your own country are not your concern, then please, with respect, stay out of our affairs. Let me be plain. Zimbabwe must be allowed to solve our crisis ourselves, not through meddling from our neighbors, not through another coup, but through the honest reckoning we have postponed for 45 years. That ZANU-PF has metastasized into a minority regime oppression, a black majority, and can no longer be transformed from within. What we need is a broad-based stakeholder engagement that gives birth to a new social compact. You should know, Mr. President, what it costs us to write to you in this register. The verbal abuse, the banned shops, and the ignites endured by Zimbabweans in the country are agonizing to witness from across the border. I understand South African anger. I also understand why a qualified accountant from Bulawayo or a teacher from Mutare will board a combi with a single suitcase to chase a job, washing dishes in Sandton. We are a proud people, and our timid has been exploited by a small political clique who profit from our humiliation. So here is the request, Mr. President, and the call to action. Decline future invitations to Mnangagwa's farm. Insist as SADC chair that any engagement with Zimbabwe include the voices Mnangagwa has tried to silence. Civic society, the churches, the legal profession, the opposition, organized business, and ordinary citizens. To call publicly for the withdrawal of Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 and for the unqualified protection of the 2013 Constitution. Stop confusing efforts of incumbents with the stability of nations. And if none of this interests you, if the 17 million people